I remember when he came home, when Mom brought him home from the hospital. It was just before Christmas, and Chris and I had gotten these new red jackets with embroidered trim and stuff on them, and we were all excited about Christmas, but I think we were more excited about Mom bringing that new baby home.
I'm, I, I certainly remember David practicing the piano, and I remember that he did it without a lot of prompting. I mean, he was still a kid at 7, 8, 9 years old and wanting to be outside and building forts in the ravine and doing things like that with Remus Karkleys. Um, I remember them building a dam, the little creek in the back of the house, between the ravine between the Karkleys and the Mackeys, and David and Remus thinking that they're going to develop some new form of living down there. I don't know if they were going, they had water. What else do you need, right? Water and Ritz crackers probably, and a jar of peanut butter. But they were going to, build a fort and live down in the ravine.
Yeah, when I bought albums, mostly it was due to the fact that they were double albums. Like Chicago CTA, the original album, it was a double album. I got that at Goldblatt's because I got 2 albums for the price of one, And of course, I listened to that. We didn't have much else to listen to. Frank Zappa was another one. I got that in Ann Arbor, double album. It was all economic but early on that he was forced to listen to some of the big influences in his life. And it ended up because they were 2-for-1 albums. And I found that kind of amazing.
I first became friends with Dave elementary school, walking to school, throwing snowballs at each other. We were actually kind of enemies on the way to school. But after a while, got to be good buds, and that's the first time with David, meeting David.
My earliest memory of Dave was probably maybe fourth grade. He was a couple years older than I was back at Jefferson School, and I think they were 2 years older than me, and they did a band thing there. I don't know if they really actually played. It was, I think, called the Colorful Imagination, and a few of my other friends were there, and we just thought it was cool, and we were into the music scene already, kind of, from a outside looking in, but eventually I became a musician too, and it was one of my driving influences at that time. So
I met Dave in the fall of 1966 when we both started third grade together at Jefferson Elementary. And I just remember him being blonde and just a little bit chubby and really, really cute and just really funny. And I think we were fast friends, fast buds. So we were in a band called the Colorful Imagination. I don't really consider myself an actual member because I just kind of pranced around and shook a tambourine. Dave and the others, did all the work. And Kay Stickney was the other chick in the band.
He asked me to be part of this little group he put together at Jefferson School in, I think it was 5th grade. This was what was so cool about Dave, was that he had this knack for, he kept asking me. He knew what he wanted to do even back then. He was targeted in, he just wanted to create. He loved music. He had found his passion apparently, and he wanted everybody else on board. So he asked, and I got to dance up the aisles and sing, shake maracas and sing "Let the Sunshine In," and I can still see him on the stage and with that band. And it took some guts. A 5th grader, who has that drive so early?
first band would have been Upper Crust. I was in 9th grade playing football, getting ready to go out to football practice, and David and Remus, the guitar player, came up and asked me at that time if I wanted to play with them. I mean, I was about ready to just go back in and take the football uni out. I said, let's go, but felt good, and then we joined up and started Upper Crust.
When Dave practiced in the band, down in the basement, I thought it was great. And I couldn't believe, first of all, that my parents would put up with it. My dad would maybe go to work or whatever, you know, but my mom would put up with that for so many years. It got kind of loud and stuff, but, you know, I didn't mind. And they were bad. When, you know, when they first started, he was in grade school. And that's what was so amazing, was that everybody tolerated it and put up with it. And then as they got better, you know, it was great. That basement rocked.
Never had too much trouble getting him to practice. I do remember that. I mean, he was willing to do that. He didn't always play what he was supposed to be playing, but that was okay because he was at the piano. I just remember him being at the piano an awful lot. And this was by the time we were in town, so I remember where the piano was. He was there. And then Chucky Hartzell and one of those kids would go downstairs and they would pound on whatever of course he didn't have did he have a keyboard down there? He must have had a keyboard at some point downstairs. But they would play down there. They'd have maybe 3 or 4 fellows, and then I would go up to the 3rd floor. Things got a little noisy.
Yeah, they had a little junior high variety show, and most of the acts were what you would expect of 7th and 8th graders, not real sophisticated, and you know, some tumbling or somebody tap dancing or whatever. But David and, I don't know, do you remember who else was Chucky in?
Remus and probably Chucky.
Probably Chucky in that group, and they did Only the Beginning by Chicago, and it sounded like the real deal. And I remember thinking, wow, this kid can really play music. But the other part of the story is, you know, and you tell that part better. So you about the tryout for the variety show.
Yeah, during the time period when David was doing the tryout for that one of those initial performances, I remember him coming home being very indignant that his group was rejected for the variety show the first time around when they auditioned, and the judges thought that they were lip syncing the music. So David, no, they can't understand what we're doing, and that they didn't really listen to us, and so they made them play it again after they assured them that they were really not lip syncing. There was no record in the background playing, and so he got some validation, you know, by doing that.
Oh, my first memory of Dave, I actually met Dave and Chuck at the high school, but we were in junior high. We went to separate junior high schools, and we were doing some kind of a function at the high school, probably a musical thing, but we met in the hall on the break, and we were talking about, you know, and he said, would you guys have a band? Because Chuck and Dave always had a band, you know. And I said, well, yeah, I've got one, but mine was different than theirs. We had a little Dixieland type band, and so we met then and we talked, and then that was the first time I'd met him.
Well, I saw him play before I met him. He played at Lincoln School, I think it was in 1970. It was like a couple weeks after the second Chicago album came out. And my house, my sister was like 5 years older, so she had a harmony book and she was taking violin. And so I had a lot of interest in music like that. So when I saw his band play my school, I liked it a lot. So I asked my mom to find out who he was, and she found out where he lived and all that stuff. And he lived on the other side of the ravine. So my mom got a hold of his mom, and I went over there to meet him. And I can remember vividly the first moment I met him. He was up in his bedroom. He had a second-level bedroom. You went up the staircase and you went on the right, and he had the bedroom on the left at that time. He had a telescope in there, and he was writing out the horn parts to 25 or 6/4, which was on the charts. And he handed me a songbook and a piece of paper and a pencil and said, here, write out a chart with all these sections here, but take all these things and make it exactly the same, but move it 2.5 spaces down, which is taking it from C to B flat. And I closed the book. And I remember I'd seen another one of the books, and it said piano vocal on the book, but his book didn't say it. It said complete sketch score on it. He was buying these songbooks that had all the parts in them in C. You know, a broke single line, and then he was transposing them. So he had me transposing the horn parts for 25/6/4. He said, you got to count for every measure, and where there isn't a horn part, you don't. You just put a blank measure, right? You get a chart out. That's the first time I met him. So 5 minutes in, I've got complete sketch score, and I'm transposing horn parts. I thought, this is just unreal, this guy.
He had a little group, and they used to play at the YWCA down in St. Joe, Michigan, and it was called the Drop-In. And I remember I used to ride my bike down to the YWCA to the Drop-In to see Dave and his band, you know. And I thought it was great because I was interested in music. I started playing guitar, and I'd always be singing. My family was very musical, so I was singer, kind of, and I started playing guitar. So I'd go down to the Drop-In, and that's where I met Dave, you know, and I thought, hey, this guy's pretty nice. He's got a nice little combo. I met Remus, and I think Bruce Bartz, Dick Ziegert, and I'm not sure if they were called Colorful Imagination or Upper Crust at that point. Well, anyway, that's where we met, and of course, we were classmates, so we would see each other just about every day at school, and kind of picked up rapport, you know, a musician kind of rapport. And later, I lived probably about 5 blocks away from where Dave lived, because we both lived right in town and went to Milton Junior High. And I went over to his house. They were practicing, and he had a spare electric guitar over there. And so he sold me my first electric guitar and amp, a custom electric guitar with a Kalamazoo amp. And so that's kind of where it all started from there, junior high.
He was very noticeable from the beginning because he could read like a whiz. He read music very well. I don't know whether he'd admit that, but he did. And he was kind of a leader, not a loudmouth leader, but he was a leader, and the troops kind of respected him because of his musicality. Music theory class, he was kind of creative, and I think he kind of ho-hummed the fact that I like to teach in a more structured fashion. He was kind of free-thinking. And that was okay. I wasn't discouraging it. It's just got a little frustrating to find he wasn't putting the chords where I thought he should put them at the beginning. Later on in the course, in that end of that year, they could do about what they wanted to do, and that's when he really was a shiner.
A lot of what I remember about Dave is his beautiful voice and the way he loved to sing. He we had this teacher, Mr. Tower, who was this kind of very great teacher, eccentric, kind of wacky, and Dave really saw that wackiness and understood it, you know, whereas some others might have said, oh, that guy's, you know, kind of nuts, but he really understood this teacher's approach to music and the way he was teaching it. You know, we had Mr. Bowen in 9th grade. Dave used to, he'd make me laugh so hard, you know, tears with the you know, singing in this beautiful basso voice with a real thick vibrato like an opera singer. He and I used to do that in the car on the freeway, just sing in opera. We'd speak in opera, and just fun. Hours of mindless entertainment.
Marching band with Dave was, he was always you know, a musical leader, and my best memory is senior year, because I was a clarinet player, and so I love clarinet players and I love clarinet music in concert music setting. In marching band, you're in the back, nobody can hear you, you're dragging along at the end. It's really hard to march, it's awful. Well, somehow in senior year, Dave put together through the summer, he was the drum leader, and he put together some really above average drum parts, and he bought some and he wrote some, but it wasn't like all the snare drums play the same part, and there's 2 bass drums and they're beating the same, so they needed more percussionists, and I got to play bass drum in it. And so, you know, there's a 1 bass drum player doing this, and the other one's got another part, and we're clicking on the rims, and some really cool beats. It was amazing. The one thing, I don't know if he wrote it, but it was in 7/8, and we had it down, and I remember going to band camp, and you know, he calls it off while we're marching we march from camp to the practice field, and he calls it, and we start playing it, and we hit that 7/8, and people just about started falling down. The band stopped it. Oh, I wish we had a film of that. They turn around, they're hollering at us, and Dave's like, wait a minute. Just keep marching. We did it right. It'll come around. And so they did it. And, you know, eventually you get back on sync there. And just keep marching. Don't listen to the drums. Just keep marching. And it worked. So it was great.
Another thing Dave Mackey did, and you can look at this, one of the band shots where they have the marching band where they're up in the, they sit up in the press box and take a picture way high up. What Dave would do is he would stand perfectly crooked. He would get his feet to be like perfectly there, and so you'd see this picture of everybody perfectly stand up except Dave perfectly crooked with a snare drum like this, but his feet planted perfectly straight here. You know what I mean? It's the shot's there, okay? So that's stuff Dave would do.
First band I played in with Dave, I remember joyously telling my mom that a guy, Dave Mackey, asked me to be in his band. And it was, I think our name was, I can't remember our name. It's been a while, but I remember we were meeting, Chuck was in the band and Buddy, and he had a whole horn section, you know, doing Chicago and stuff like that. And I think Dave Bartz was in the band too. That might be correct, yeah. And we practiced at the Plywood Inn, and that was so cool. I thought I'm on my way, because that's the kind of music I like, horn band, and so I was starting to do it, and it was working.
I moved to St. Joe in 9th grade, and I met Dave in choir. I can't remember what they must have been the Milton somethings, the choir. I don't remember her name. Mr. Bowen, of course. He came down from the high school and taught the Milton choir program. I believe we did a variety show or something that year, but that's when I first met Dave. He was very kind of a quiet, friendly guy. Of course, he was very cute, but I'm sure he had a girlfriend. And then I always knew him through choirs throughout high school, and we were in music theory together. And he pretty much thought I was silly all the time, because we had similar yet different musical taste. You know, I liked David Bowie and Alice Cooper, and he liked Yes and Frank Zappa and jazz, and he kind of turned me around to jazz through the years, but he gave me a hard time about my musical taste. So We had a like, not like relationship.